Hi, today I want to share with you a practice that I like to do at the start of my meditation practice or spiritual practice. It's a breath practice called Nadi Shodhana, so it's a pranayama. And I'll timestamp where the actual practice starts in case you want to jump right into that. But I also want to share with you first three things that I think can be useful for those of us who might want to start meditating or having a spiritual practice, but we have no idea where to start. And I decided to share this with you because in the time that I've been meditating and studying different spiritual paths, I have had many people ask me, okay, I want to start meditating, but where do I start, or which practice do I do, which spiritual philosophy or path do I choose? And I can understand why it can be, a challenging question, because there are so many spiritual paths, there are so many, different practices within those paths. Hundreds, thousands of them, that, it can be kind of daunting, to kind of understand where to start. So, and I know that this happened to me as well when, I've been, a spiritual practitioner probably for, 6, 7 years, can't remember exactly. And my personal path kind of just, I kind of just eased into it and decided to take a super deep dive plunge into it. But when my first kind of encounter with this world was, I won't get into the whole story, but essentially a bunch of things happened to me that I didn't know how to explain. So I decided to, kind of study or research what was, what was connected to them. And the door that initially opened to me was shamanism. So I started studying shamanism. I studied that particular, shamanism and healing course for 3 years. And the part that I want to talk about here is the healing part. So it was shamanism and healing, and the healing aspect of the teaching included a myriad of practices, many of them from Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism and Bön. And and my teacher would teach us so many different practices in, sometimes several of them in each class. And I've been super geeky with all of that, so I would test all the practices, but there was a very clear, it was very clear to me which practices were for me and which weren't. And I think that was because, or that is because I'm very sensitive to, energy, and I trust my intuition in a sense, but I know that it's not the case for everybody, and it's good to have certain parameters perhaps as to, how do I choose a path. And I will also tell you that, this is of course my opinion. I'm not trying to push any particular, path or, or practice onto you. I guess my intention is just to, share kind of like a morsel of something in case, if you're feeling the curiosity to start meditating or to, start a path. I feel that one of the best ways is kind of just, pick the morsels that, that resonate with you. And of course, I'm not an accomplished spiritual practitioner, so there are many other teachers out there that can that can teach you and give you transmissions, which I cannot. But I'm here for a reason, in a sense. And if you happen to encounter this video and you're interested in the topic, maybe keep watching. And if and if you're interested in something that I talk about, maybe go into that particular thing and research it more. The 3 core things that I would suggest to any friend that asks me, where do I start meditating or how do I start meditating is essentially 3 things. One is choose the practice that you love, that gives you joy, that feels best. The second one is, I'll explain these, but The second one would be choose a path that has a greater vision, and by greater vision, I mean, I guess I'll just say it plainly like this. Choose a path that has as its end goal liberation, or, or realizing your true nature, or communing with God, if that's the path. Whatever the path you choose is, just choose one that, that really has that, that great vision of I don't know which other word to use, of liberating, of realizing individuation, of realizing your true self. And what I mean by this is, I'll explain it better in a moment, but I wouldn't stay in a path that kind of stays at a superficial level. And the third one is choose the path that is available. Choose the thing that you have available right now. Unless it really doesn't resonate with you, but if you are interested in something and something related to that is appearing in your life, in your path, maybe a few blocks from where you live, there's a Buddhist temple or a Kabbalah temple, whatever. Start there. So the three things are, choose a practice that you love, that gives you joy. Choose a path that has liberation as its vision, as its goal, and choose the one that is available to you. So the first one, choose a practice that you love. There's a phrase that I really like. I'm not exactly sure where it comes from. There are probably many different versions of this, but it says, your guru is the one that tastes like honey. And here, guru, we could see that word as, like the source of knowledge, the source of awareness, of enlightenment that you're getting. It can be a physical teacher, or we could also, see this word as, as the practice. Your practice is the one that tastes like honey. Yeah, and even with the word teacher, your guru, your teacher should be one that you really like. A teacher, a practice that you resonate with, that you like being around with. And if we're talking specifically about a practice, we want to choose a practice that we enjoy practicing. I read recently I think I've mentioned it in another video, because I'm rereading Quantum Consciousness by Stephen Wolinski. And he talks about how, I can't remember how he frames it, but essentially it's better to, walk our path imperfectly than walk somebody else's path perfectly. And it relates to this idea of choosing a practice that gives us joy. If it comes down to it, if you're going to sit down and, and meditate or practice, it's likely that you're going to do it, easier if it's a practice that you actually like, rather than if it's one that you're, forcing yourself to do because it doesn't feel good or you really don't enjoy it. And I know that, many of us have drilled into our minds that, we have to put effort into things and strive, and, and it's not that, that the practice that gives you joy won't involve effort. Sometimes we, it's not necessarily that we wake up and just, are feeling super, energetic about sitting down and meditating for whatever time it is. It will imply a certain level of maybe effort, discipline, etc. But one of the ways in which you can understand if a practice that you're learning or you learned is for you is that it's a practice that you're going to enjoy practicing. And for me, and this might not apply for everybody, but there's also kind of like an energetic impact that becomes quite clear when a practice is for you. And I'll give you the example. I just mentioned that my first doorway to this world was through shamanism and healing. And, the healing aspect were this myriad different, spiritual practices. And the way in which I knew which practices were for me was that as soon as, even when we were just doing them, in class rather than me by myself, I would just feel like such a huge, very tangible physical energetic impact, and it would happen only with certain practices. And this doesn't mean that that practice is better than the next practice that I was taught, but it does mean that, that there is something in my body and my system that is resonating with that particular one. We could speak of karma, but I won't get into that. But there is something quite tangible in terms of, yes, this practice gives me joy, and also this practice is making me feel something, and I can, feel the tangible physical impact of it. So that's, I think that's another, I don't know, like a good gauge, a good sign, that a practice might be for you. And just to give you another example of this, I first studied shamanism and healing, as I mentioned, but I've studied, and practiced, because I would call myself a practitioner rather than a scholar. And I practiced Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana, Dzogchen, Taoism, Kabbalah, Trika Shaivism. And the ones that, I don't know, I resonate a lot with, for instance, Vajrayana Buddhism, Dzogchen, Bön, Trika Shaivism, and it has been really magical and beautiful, because even, when I started studying all of this, my teacher is very, he's not a, what's the term for it? He's not orthodox. And that's probably something that I really resonated with as well, because I'm not an orthodox practitioner either, I think. But to give you an example, I had already studied, a lot of this, but I had never studied with kind of like a more orthodox teacher, or I'd never gone to, Nepal, India. I've never gone to Tibet yet, but anyhow, so, I had my practice, and I had studied, a little or a bit of it, or a lot of it. And then at a certain point in my life, some years ago, I won't get into the story either, but it was through a dream. I dreamt of this person that I didn't know, and this person ended up being the spiritual leader of the Bön tradition. Bön is the native spiritual tradition of Tibet, but in the diaspora in the 50s, many of these teachers fled Tibet, and this particular teacher ended up in Nepal and started started a temple there, and et cetera, et cetera. So essentially, I dreamt this person, and I decided that I would go to Nepal to meet him, and I did so. And it was kind of like the doorway for many other things. But the thing that I wanted to get to is that when I was in Nepal, I started kind of being pulled to all these places that were pilgrimage places of a figure that is known as the second Buddha, Padmasambhava, or Guru Rinpoche, whom, I guess I was connected in a sense because of the lineage of the practices that I had studied before, but I had never formally studied about him. And, and so it was quite curious that when I was in Nepal, I was just pulled to these places. And I remember in one very, very specific moment, I was in a place called, no, it wasn't in Parping, it was in Maratika, where there are these amazing caves. And I was with this group and with a teacher, but it was very, they were reading the prayers in Tibetan, and I didn't understand Tibetan, so I was just kind of there for the experience and being part of it. But at some point, I remember that I was struck with this energy, and I tasted the energy, and I was like, I tasted it not with my mouth, but I felt it, and I was like, this energy, I know this energy. This energy is very similar to, it's the same energy that I have felt before in this other practice. And, and I just kind of like automatically knew the mantra. And it ended up being that it was, we were doing a practice of, a particular Buddha that I had already practiced with before. But it's really interesting to me that, there's a very tangible kind of like energetic impact, and and there's something, it doesn't necessarily have to happen to everybody. There are other spiritual paths that I don't resonate with, which doesn't mean that they're the wrong paths. It just means that they might not be the best way for me to kind of like enter that world. So yeah, to stop rambling about this, it's I think it's a very good kind of like marker to practice a practice that, I don't know, that resonates with you, either because you really enjoy it, because you like performing it, because you feel a specific energetic impact. In shamanism, for instance, there's also, I'm sure that you've probably seen shamans that have their full attires, and and maybe wear feathers and use plants, and kind of like a lot of paraphernalia, and maybe they're dancing, or they perform. Let's say that the ritual is performed in a kind of like performative way, to say it in a certain way. But in a sense, that same kind of like energetic scope can also be achieved without those elements. What I'm getting at is that, you could have two shamans with the same, I don't know, like the same level of capacity, but different styles. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, the one that is wearing the paraphernalia is going to be better than the other one, but it just means that there are different styles. And maybe, because the way in which I particularly am, I'm going to resonate more with the one that is not using it, or I am going to resonate with the dance and the movement and the performative aspect. So, to summarize this, this whole ramble is, your particular way of being and kind of, I don't know, attunement and needs are going to resonate with certain practices more than with others. So once again, the summary of all this is: choose a practice that you love, that you enjoy, that gives you joy. The second point is to choose a path that, again, this is just my opinion, but, choose a path that, I don't know, that has like a large vision, a big scope, like I don't know, an intention that goes beyond just kind of like calming your anxiety or reducing your stress, that where there's a kind of a, I don't know, a vision, a whole vision of what, your spirit is. And, in very plain terms, I would say choose a path that has as its end goal liberation or realizing your true nature, or, if it's a, I don't know, if God is in the mix, a practice that, whose end goal, or whose end goal is, to have a real experience with God. And I say this because, since spirituality kind of came to the West, I know that the West, we also have our spiritual roots, but there's it's very easy to kind of just share the kind of the superficial aspects of spirituality, and I would kind of say that I'm doing the same thing, in this YouTube video, because there isn't a framework or a space where we could really go in depth in all these things. This is why I'm mentioning that, my intention is kind of just to, I don't know, like maybe nourish this curiosity that you have. But I'll highlight again, if this is something that you want to pursue, I would encourage you to, find a teacher whom with you can, really learn it in depth, and, and go into a path that, that kind of, I don't know, that takes everything into account. And it's very easy to kind of, I don't know, think that we are, I don't know, that meditation is, good enough if it, if it helps us regulate our emotions, or it helps us with brain plasticity, or, which are amazing benefits of meditation, but going into a spiritual path is so much more than that. So I don't really know, in which other words to say it, but that would be it. Choose a path that, that you resonate with, of course, but that has a, that will eventually lead you to liberation or to realizing your true essence, your true self. And yeah, and and many of the of the practices actually have that scope. Many of the practices will take you there if you if you continue with the practice. But that would be my my other suggestion, humble suggestion. And the third suggestion in kind of choosing a a practice or a path would be, choose the one that is available. And what I mean by this is, if you are somebody who is interested in meditating but hasn't started, or you're interested in, in kind of, I don't know, if you feel that you have that, that thirst of God. I'm not saying that you should, necessarily go into a path where, God is in the picture, but it's just a way of saying it. If you have that thirst, if you feel your spirit is kind of thirsty of, of developing, just go with it, rather than, than waiting for the perfect practice or the perfect teacher or the perfect, path. So, what I mean by this is, for instance, if you've been wanting to meditate and there happens to be a Zen Buddhist temple, not far from your house, start there. If you've been wanting to, test out a pranayama breath practice and you've encountered this video, start here. And again, we could speak of karma, we could speak of, our unconscious. We are starting to notice the things that, that we kind of want to, we want to walk towards, or things that potentially have something for us to learn. So, start with the thing that is in front of you, in a sense. If you try it out, if you go to the Zen Buddhist temple and you figure out that it's not really for you, or you don't really resonate with it, well, that's fine. You'll probably meet somebody there who has, another option, or, or you'll encounter another one in, when you search online, whatever. But start with what is available and what is the most simple. Because, for instance, if I don't know, if I'm super, I know that I want to study Trika Shaivism, but, but I cannot find any, any good teacher. Now with online teaching, it's much more simpler, I guess. But I don't know, let's say I cannot find a teacher, I'm not saying that you should forget about that, because, you're probably having that interest for a reason. But, but maybe you can start with something that is, that is closer to home, that you will definitely do, rather than, delay it until you are able to go to Kashmir and study with a teacher there. So, to summarize the three suggestions that I would make in terms of how to find a practice or a path for you is, choose the one that you love doing, the one that gives you joy, the one that you enjoy doing. Choose a path that has liberation as its goal, and choose the practice or the path that is available, or start with the one that is available. So those are my three suggestions. If you have any other, there are so many things that we could talk about, but I just thought of those three as kind of like, the platform to start from. So now the practice. Nadi Shodhana. So, this is a practice that comes from the yogic tradition. It's a pranayama, which means that, it's a it's a practice that works with the breath. And I mean, I was doubting whether to say this or not, but so I'll give you two stories. Related to why the breath is important. Maybe they're not stories. Oh, I'm rambling. Sorry. So there's a lot of information now about the correlation between working with our breath, or with our, between our breath and our brain, and our nervous system. Also, the working with our breath helps us helps us with the prana circulation in our body. Prana is, there are different types of prana, but prana is essentially the circulating energy in our body. And I find it interesting that the first teaching that Sakyamuni Buddha taught was to bring observation to our breath. So, there is something there, with the breath. And also with, in therapy, even though this particular practice won't, the aim is not to kind of bring out stagnated contents in our, in our body and our psyche. But there's, when body-mind therapy started, we could credit Wilhelm Reich as the father of body-mind therapy. But I don't know if this story that I'm going to tell you is completely accurate. That's what my research says, and I've heard it mentioned a lot. I'm sure it's true, but it probably has nuances. But essentially, Wilhelm Reich, when he was a student of Freud. So at that point in psychoanalysis, it was a huge no-no to touch the patient. And the story says that Wilhelm Reich was working with a patient, and the way, or yeah, they were trying to get free association. So the patient would sit or lie there, and they would produce free associations. But with this particular patient, Wilhelm Reich noticed that they could not produce free associations, and he noticed that the patient was very tense in this area and was not breathing. So he invited the patient to take a deep breath and relax and breathe. And when the patient did that, they were able to to produce free associations. And I think in a later session, Reich noticed that they were having trouble, and that this area was tense. So he went and massaged the area of the respiratory muscles, and the patient, not only were they able to produce free associations, but they also went into a cathartic regression. So this is and we could maybe see this as kind of like the start of of kind of incorporating the body in therapy and breath in therapy. But all of this is to tell you, you probably already know it, but to reinforce the notion that breath is extremely important in our, not only in our, in our physical functions, in our, brain functions and our body functions, but also at a more energetic level. Our breath can also help us regulate as I mentioned, the energy in our body. And, and in terms of the brain, both hemispheres of the brain. So Nadi Shodhana is, I'll show you in a moment, but essentially it's a practice where we want to balance both, both nadis, or channels of the body, Ida and Pingala, which are the two lateral channels to Shushuma. And when we balance, when we encourage the balance of these two channels, and the free flow of energy through our breath, we can also encourage it to to go into either Shushuma or the central channel, depending on what we're working with. But I won't trouble you with any of that. In in more practical terms, Nadi Shodhana is it's a practice that you can do, as soon as you wake up, or you can do it, at other moments in your day where you feel kind of, ruffled, or, you feel that your mind is very chaotic. And it's, it's also a nice way to kind of like start your practice. So you can start with Nadi Shodhana, and then you go into your meditation. And it's a very simple practice. So essentially for the practice, we use our right hand, and we typically use the thumb and the ring finger, or the annular finger. And some Tibetans also use, the pointing finger, but, like traditionally we use these two. So what we want to do is first with our thumb, we want to close our right nostril. So we close our right nostril, and we're going to inhale through our left nostril. So we close our right nostril with our thumb. We inhale with our left nostril. And then I want to close my left nostril with my ring finger. And I want to hold my breath for a moment, with both of my nostrils closed. So I inhale with the left nostril, I close, and then I open the right nostril, so I let go of the thumb, and I exhale through that nostril. And then I inhale again through the right nostril, I close, I open the other nostril, I exhale, I inhale through that nostril, close. So you get the point. I'll say it again, but essentially we are alternating the breath between nostrils, and we're using these two fingers to close and open the nostrils. So we close the right nostril, we inhale through the left, we close, we open the right nostril, and we exhale. Then we inhale through the right nostril before closing it. We close the right nostril, we hold, and we open the left nostril, and we exhale. And we inhale again through the left nostril, hold, and we go like that. I'll show you. I'll do it for a few rounds, just for a moment, so you can see it, and then I'll keep explaining. So. Okay, so you get the gist of it. You use these two fingers to close the nostrils, and you alternate between nostrils. Now, a few other things. Where do we put the tongue? So for most of the practices for many of the practices in pranayama, not I won't say most, but we usually have the tongue kind of like pushed towards the end of our the rooftop of our mouth. And in some practices we push as well. But if you feel too confused by where to put the tongue, just leave it, floating comfortably. If you can and you want, you can just push your tongue to the back of the roof of your mouth, so you can, leave your tongue there. And also during the breath practice, you can kind of like bring your awareness to the, to your third eye, to this part of your face. And another thing that is important to mention is that we don't want to put effort into the practice. It's kind of like the idea of Wu Wei in Taoism, like doing without doing, or non-doing. So my teacher describes it as, imagine like a cloud just floating. So you want your breath to be as soft and easy flowing as possible. You don't want to do like a lot of effort and push it and like push your air out. Just try to do it as kind of like as effortless and soft as possible. And you will probably first notice that maybe one side is, I don't know, it is more blocked than the other one. Maybe you feel more aware when you do one side or the other. But one of the ways to know if you're doing the practice, let's say correctly, if it's working, is that after a few rounds, you should feel more balanced, more grounded, and it should feel nice as well. And okay, so the first, let's say, layer of harmony is, just practice doing this, doing the breath, practice, keeping your awareness in this part, in your third eye, and try to, get to a point where you feel comfortable with your breath, where you're not, if you feel that, you end the practice and you're kind of like, that there's something that that you're pushing or that is not kind of easy flowing, and that's going to give you probably more anxiety. So just let's say the first layer of the practice, just practice that it's easy flowing, that is soft, your observation here, and if you want to, the tongue in the back of the roof of your mouth. Then there are other few layers of, let's say, harmony that we can add to it. Once you've done this, a few times, or, for, I don't know, a few days, and you feel that, that you have it, that you've understood it, that your body understands it, now we can add kind of like a time ratio to the practice. So the first one would be to have a ratio of 1, 1, and 1. So let's say the same amount of time for your inhale, the same amount of time for your hold, and the same amount of time for the exhale. The same amount for the inhale, the hold, and the exhale. So for instance, to give a, a whole number, if I inhale in 10, using this 1-1-1 ratio, I will inhale in 10, I will hold 10, and I will exhale in 10. I will inhale in 10, hold 10, exhale in 10. So that's another, that's the first other kind of harmony layer that you can add. Once you feel that you're comfortable with that, you can add another ratio, which would be 1, 2, 2. So using the same example of 10, let's say it takes you 10 counts to inhale. Now using the 1 to 2 ratio, 10 to inhale, then you want to hold for 20, and you want to exhale for 20. You inhale, in 10, you hold 20, you exhale 20. If you do your own math depending on the number that you're using, but essentially, the ratios. The first one is free. The first level of harmony would be 1, 1, 1. The second level of harmony would be 1, 2, 2. And the third one, this would be kind of like our goal, but don't jump straight into this one. But it would be 1, 4, 2. So let's say that, we're using 10 again. So we would inhale in 10, then we would hold for 40, and we would exhale in 20. We would inhale in 10, we would hold 40, and we would exhale 20. So it would be a ratio of 1, 4, 2. And those are the 3, let's say, levels of additional harmony that you could bring. There's I'm not sure how much information is online if you search for Nadi Shodhana, but I'm sure you'll find some. And you can also, if you're interested in it, you can research, where it comes from. I learned it in Raya Yoga, which could be translated as Royal Yoga. There's also another yoga branch. I'm going to blank out on it because I have such a weird memory. Sawa yoga, which has, I think it's also called sun and moon yoga, which, has studied a lot of the relation between the breath and, and the pranas and the body, etc. So yeah, if you're interested, you can, deep dive into all the additional kind of history and, impact, implications, benefits, etc. But by now we all know that, that meditation has just, a tremendous amount of benefits. Brain plasticity, reduction in anxiety, reduction in stress, emotional regulation, physical well-being, etc., etc., etc. So, my teacher even, I think he once told us that, it would even be better to teach children, instead of teaching them to count to 10 when they're angry, teach them to do Nadi Shodhana. But yeah, if you try it, let me know how it went. And, this can be kind of like your start of your meditation practice. So you can do a few rounds of Nadi Shodhana. I wouldn't recommend to do it for a long period, maybe just a few minutes. And, and when you're done and when you feel, the kind of like the balance, you can just, stay in meditation, in contemplation. And if you're, if you are somebody who struggles with, if you have a monkey mind and you struggle with kind of, you struggle with meditating, we can use aids in meditation. It's, that's kind of like one of the first steps, I guess. One of the, very common aids in meditation is concentrating on your breath. But you can also, mantras, for instance, can be, a sort of aid in the sense that, we're giving the, the rational mind something to kind of, grab onto, while everything else happens. But you can concentrate on your breath. You could even count, you can, as you're inhaling and exhaling, you can count to, let's say 10, and then from 10 to 1. Actually first, 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10. And once you have that down, you can count to 10, and from 10 to 1. And these, kind of like meditation with aids would be, kind of like a first step for being able to, concentrate your energy. But anyhow, you can start with Nadi Shodhana and then just go into your meditative state. And that's it for today, I guess. If you try it out, I'd love to hear how it went. And if you have any questions, you can also ask them in the comments. Have a nice day.